Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining this stream. Today is 12th of June. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments that Russian media and public is paying attention to, and I hope you will find this episode informative and useful. Before I start our new segment, let me just remind you that you can send any question or the comment that you want to highlight during these programs through PayPal or Boosty platform, or you can use a super chat on Rumble. For that matter, I remind you that I'm streaming simultaneously on YouTube and Rumble channels. And of course, after news segment, if there will be any questions or the comments, I will react on it. And so that's being said, let's go through some news now. And first of all, dear friends, let me congratulate everybody with Russia Day. I know 99% of views on my videos are from outside of Russia, but nevertheless, majority of our community, I believe, don't see Russia or the Russians as their enemies, and hopefully you will join this celebration, this congratulation. So happy Russia Day to everybody. Since 1995, this day being celebrated, this holiday in Russia as a Russia Day. A greater, relatively new tradition that will last for centuries, hopefully. So happy Russia's Day, everybody. And let's go through some other news. Now, RIA Novosti is reporting, dear friends, that Russian president held a meeting on the state of armament program. And this happened yesterday. And this was the first time when Russian president spoke about Russian nuclear triad since the recent attacks on Russian strategical bomber fleet in two airfields. I'll give you some key points from statements that Russian president made during this meeting. So the president, Vladimir Putin, held a meeting on the state armament program. The head of state noted Russia's success in this area and gave instructions on developing the defense industry. The main statements are the implementation period for the state armament program is from 2027 to 2036. So in this 10-year 10-year period, Russian armed forces will rearm big time with latest weapons. It will affect their entire range of their weapons. Russian president said new state program should set guidelines for the formation of long-term production plans for the defense industry. The state program must be linked in terms of time frames and their activities to the program for the development of the military-industrial complex. The state program will also reflect the current needs of the armed forces. Particular attention should be paid to a nuclear triad. Vladimir Putin said the nuclear triad remains the guarantor of the Russian sovereignty. And therefore, by the way, I was absolutely correct while saying that recent attack on Russian nuclear triad cannot and will not be ignored by Moscow. As I said, this is the first time since that attack that Russian president spoke about topic of nuclear triad. He also went to say that Russian defense enterprises with the state support have increased production volumes many times over the recent years. Russia needs to take into account global trends in the development of military technologies, especially since the number of countries that are actively working in this direction is growing. It is also obvious that the emphasis in the new state program should be placed on the creation of most modern weapon systems. According to President, it is important to increase the combat capabilities of the ground forces, and it is necessary to calculate the needs in advance and begin preparing the infrastructure for the deployment of the new weapon systems, including bases, arsenals, and airfields. And in this on this point, I guess Russian president meant that, well, no longer Russian planes, strategical bombers or otherwise, will be stationed, I guess, under the open sky, as it was agreed in the START treaty, for example. And that's why many people are still not realizing and asking questions why Russian bombers were in open air. That's why it was a part of the START and SWORD treaties, right? President also stated that it is necessary to provide a set of systemic measures for the creation, modernization, and repair of aircraft equipment. It is important to increase the export potential of the Russian weapons and equipment, especially those models that have been tested in a real combat operations. The new state program should become a tool for implementing the Navy development strategy until 2050. It is also necessary to develop a well-thought-out personnel policy and take into account in advance the possibility of producing civilian products at the defense enterprises. These are some of the key points that Russian president made during this meeting on the topic of rearmament, basically, of the Russian militaries. And as I already said, first time Russian president mentioned the nuclear triad. And as far as I can tell, this is not random stuff, obviously. If you were observing policies of the Russian president, his steps, then you would not be surprised that whenever there is some crisis situation, Russian president never reacts based on emotions. He always takes time, analyzes the situation, learns whatever additional information is available, including from security services. And when concrete steps are being basically worked out, only then Russian president usually is making statements or reacting on some developments. He did not speak about particularly that attack on Russian nuclear triad, Russian airfields that were housing strategical bombers. And I remind you, dear friends, that that attack was conducted formally by Kyiv regime, but obviously with the direct involvement of US, CIA, potentially Pentagon, and for 100% British MI6 and British political elites, right? And because Russian president mentioned the nuclear triad, I can assume that, well, certain retaliatory steps have been prepared. What those retaliatory steps are, I cannot know, obviously. And with the exception of few people, probably no one knows. And whatever it is, I think it is highly likely that this retaliation against countries, hostile states that were involved in this attack on Russian nuclear triad, this retaliation will be will be conducted in a way that that will allow Moscow to maintain plausible deniability. This is my understanding of their situation, and that's why I am paying attention to it. Many of you probably, dear friends, noticed that after those attacks on Russian military airfields and strategical bombers, there was quite a fast reaction from Washington. US president called Russian president, and Trump tried at least to ensure Russian colleague, Russian president, that he had no knowledge about this attack on Russian nuclear triad, and he tried to paint a picture that US was not involved. It's not just a Trump, by the way, but on several occasions, the head of Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, also made it clear that US was not engaged in this attack on Russian nuclear triad. And I believe head of State Department Marco Rubio also made a comment on that, highlighting that US was not participating in that operation. I don't know what is your take on that. Do you believe these statements or not? I definitely don't. But what I think is that potentially, some as many Western experts, by the way, American experts that have some insight about works of CIA, for example, as they are saying, for decades there is a certain rogue groups inside the CIA that are not really under control of anybody. And American experts, for example, Scott Ritter, during his recent interviews, highlighted that it is possible that the so-called Russia House CIA element most likely was informed and even engaged in preparations of this operation. Potentially, maybe President of US Trump was also briefed on the matter, but in general terms, so that he possibly did not really knew what was going to happen. And probably he did not knew that British MI6 and CIA's this group, Russia House or whatever it is, and their proxy regime in Kiev were planning to attack Russian nuclear triad. So maybe this is true, right? Exactly what happened. But in any case, we are clearly seeing certain pattern that Washington is trying to distance itself from these attacks on Russian nuclear triad, while we have not heard any statements whatsoever from London, from United Kingdom. And I think this silence on part of United Kingdom indicates direct involvement of British political, military, and intelligence elites or their community in this attack on Russian nuclear triad, and they just have nothing to say, basically. And they know perfectly well, I guess, that Russia also well informed about their participation, right? And after all, I remind you, dear friends, that just a couple of days ago, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that while commenting on these terrorist attacks on Russia, on railway network, when a passenger train was also targeted by terrorists, and also, while commenting on attacks on Russian nuclear triad, he said that potentially certain elements in US by inertia were involved in this plot, but UK was involved 100%. That's what Russian foreign minister said, and he has access to potentially almost all the classified information that there is, right? He has one of the highest level of access to classified information, so he knew what he was talking about. And therefore, now when Russian president spoke about nuclear triad, I think we are getting closer and closer to a point when, retaliation will happen, and everyone in this world would understand that you cannot attack nuclear forces. It's just not just irresponsible, but it's extremely dangerous for literally everybody on this planet. And dear friends, yesterday I watched an interview of Jeffrey Sachs, US professor. All of you are familiar, obviously, with Jeffrey Sachs and his work. And my impression was that he was kind of terrified when he, with what happened with these attacks on Russian nuclear triad. And he openly said that Kyiv regime and its backers basically endangered everybody on this planet, including his own family. He was outraged by it, right? And for reasons. And therefore, I think whatever retaliation is going to be, it will be in a scale that will forever cement the knowledge in this world that in no circumstances you can attack nuclear triad of other country if you are not intending to start a nuclear war. So let's see how the situation is going to develop, but I think we are really, really close to some very major developments. Let's say that way, and I'm quite convinced, by the way, based on my reading on the big picture, that whatever is going to be that retaliation, Moscow will probably maintain plausible deniability on its hands, although who knows, maybe even direct actions will be taken. We will find out soon. And when it comes to rearmament of the Russian military, dear friends, yesterday I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page this information that there was a ceremony of transfer of submarine Yakutsk, which is a Project 636-3 into Russian Navy. Ceremony took place in St. Petersburg. This, I believe, diesel-electric submarine, and this type of submarines being called a black hole, by the way, because they are extremely silent and almost undetectable. So this submarine is armed with 6 torpedo tubes, as well as caliber cruise missiles. So, you know, they are very capable hunters, for sure. And process of rearmament, rearming of Russian armed forces, the Russian Navy, obviously will continue and only accelerate because, as I already said, this 10-11-year plan that Russian president spoke about yesterday is focused exactly on that, to make sure that by 2036, Russian armed forces are on top of the game, as they are right now, I will say. More news, dear friends. TASS News Agency is reporting that today, on 12th of June, potentially another phase of a POW exchange will take place between Russian side and Kiev regime. So Russia and Ukraine will begin urgent medical exchanges of seriously wounded prisoners of war. Today, on Thursday, Vladimir Medinsky, presidential aide and head of the Russian delegation to their negotiations with Ukraine, stated already, dear friends, 2 stages were conducted when both sides released POWs under 25-year age. There was no information made public about number of POWs that were exchanged between the sides. And today's 3rd phase of this humanitarian process will take place, according to Medinsky, and wounded military personnel, wounded POWs will be also exchanged, which is a positive development, obviously. And when it comes to humanitarian process in this crisis, well, finally, yesterday afternoon, news broke that Turkey regime began accepting bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel, soldiers and their officers, that Russia for a 2nd week now was stating that is ready to transfer to Kiev regime. And first stage of this transfer of 6,000 bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel took place yesterday afternoon. Russia handed over bodies of over 1,200 or 1,200 bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel, and Moscow has retrieved the remnants of 27 of its service members. And the process probably will continue because I think pressure inside Ukraine, despite the attempts of the regime to hide this information, to block this information, society in Ukraine probably did learn anyways that there was on the border in the Bryansk region, there was refrigerators that were, ready to transfer bodies of killed military personnel of Kiev regime, and pressure probably from inside of Kiev controlled territory and potentially even from outside was so high that eventually Kiev regime did agree to accept its own, killed military personnel. Maybe Zelensky received some guarantees or promises from collective West countries that they will finance Zelensky to be able to pay compensations to the families of these killed military personnel. Process probably will continue, although when it comes to Kyiv regime, it's hard to tell what they're going to do. TASS news agency is also reporting that, military expert Andrei Marochko stated that Russian armed forces completely drove out Kyiv regime's forces from Stopochki settlement in the DPR. No day, by the way, is passing by without reports about more and more settlements being liberated by Russian armed forces. And, today is absolutely not exception. I'm quite sure more settlements being liberated by Russian troops on the line of contact. And probably later on today, Russian defense minister will give us an update on that. Also, RT is reporting that Ukraine membership is out of NATO summit statement, which is not really surprising, not for our community, I guess, but some people in the West that are only receiving information from propaganda outlets, from Western MSN, like BBC, CNN, MSNBC, France Press, Deutsche Welle, New York Times, and that kind of, Washington Post, or I don't know, Le Figaro, El País, and so on. If they are only receiving information from this garbage media, so-called media outlets, then they would be probably surprised, because they should think that if not today, tomorrow, Ukraine can join NATO, right? Which was never going to happen. But anyways, the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO will not be mentioned in their declaration at the bloc summit later this month. Bloomberg has reported Kiev has long sought to become a member of the US-led organization, terrorist organization, I will add from my side, that NATO is, an aim that Russia was as a threat to its national security. So, okay, nothing extraordinary, but I think this is information that worth some of our attention. There will be no Ukraine mentioning in a final statement of upcoming NATO summit that should take place in Hague, I believe. But nevertheless, collective West countries, NATO member states continue their attempts to prolong this proxy war against Russia as much as they can. And as long as there is anybody left in Kyiv-controlled territory to be sacrificed for their geopolitical agenda of the globalists and American neocons and so on. And we have information on that matter that Ukraine expects to receive another 1.7 billion pounds, which is 2.3 billion US dollars from the United Kingdom for additional weapons purchases. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal stated, and I think members of our community from UK not going to be happy about this news, because UK and basically all the other countries in NATO, by the way, definitely are in no position to continue this proxy war against Russia. But their elites, the so-called ruling elites in those countries, globalists that are in control of these elites, they continue to do whatever they can to prolong this proxy war, because they still believe that they can achieve strategic defeat of Russia, and they are doing this on expense of ordinary people in the West, and this process will continue. I mean, UK is barely capable of taking care of its pensioners, right? And UK's NHS, by the way, is a joke at this point, right? People for 5-6 months are waiting to see doctor, and this is not exaggeration, by the way. Our friends from UK can confirm this. And while society in UK is facing many issues, when social fabric is stretched almost beyond their limits, and this is also not exaggeration, take a look at their situation in Belfast, by the way, in Northern Ireland. For several days now, there are riots, and people are outraged for a crime that was committed against a young person there. And these riots turned into this anti-migration, protests turned into riots. So yeah, social fabric is stretched beyond limits. That's for sure. And it's not just the Belfast, by the way, all over the UK. And while this is happening, London is finding another 1.7 billion pounds to further prolong this proxy war against Russia, by the way. If this is not a crime against the British people committed by British government, then you tell me what this is. And UK is obviously not alone in this. As I said, globalists are in control of majority of countries in EU, right? In Europe. And Germany is also there. And German defense minister arrived today in Kiev in unannounced visit. And as it was reported by the DPA agency, he intends to familiarize himself with the situation on the ground and discuss with the Ukrainian leadership the provision of new military aid package, which is also going to be for additional billions and billions of euros, most likely, at least hundreds of millions that could be used for German people, right? To improve life of German people. But no, German government has some other intentions and interests, not their own people and their well-being. And meanwhile, we have also interesting news, dear friends, that Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that his country had received the nuclear security guarantees from France. And this is quite interesting news in my understanding, because last time I checked, Poland was a NATO member state, and France is also a NATO member state. UK, another nuclear armed country in NATO, is also in Europe, is also NATO member state, and US, main nuclear power in the Western world, is also a NATO member state. And still Poland was seeking additional security guarantees, and they spoke to France. This is laughable, man. This is a joke. And they asked France to provide these additional security guarantees. By the way, NATO membership means nothing, really. And I think most likely this is the case. Or Polish leadership is just too scared. Which one is? Maybe both, right? Because you are a member of this organization in which 3 countries already have nuclear weapons. Do you really need additional agreement with France? And one should keep in mind, by the way, that France was a guarantor of security of Poland before Nazi Germany attacked it. I believe France was a guarantor of Poland. And what France did? Nothing, right? France lost battle with their war with Nazi Germany in like 4 weeks' time. Poland was, by the way, fighting longer than France against Nazi Germany. Anyways, you tell me, dear friends, what you think. Does NATO membership really means anything anymore? Otherwise, why would Poland seek some additional security guarantees from NATO member states? What's going on there? I don't know. Hello, everyone. I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.